Hello, my name is Brian with a Y, as no doubt you know, and today you know what day, you know what time it is. It has been a full 3 weeks since the last software demo, and because I had 3 weeks to work on this project, it is the most awesome project I have yet completed. Or at least it was until Unity decided that it would be a really great idea to just crash randomly and delete all of my progress. So it was really cool until it wasn't. But even still, it's still pretty awesome because most of the functionality of this program is kept in the code, and that was preserved because I had backups of it and I stored it in a good way. So yeah, take care of your data and your data won't run off and leave you for dead. So what is the project? Well, as I mentioned, Unity, I built a simple video game in the Unity game engine. Unity game engine is a very powerful game engine for 2D and 3D games. A game engine is like it's a set of tools. It isn't a game, but it has a bunch of tools that you can use to make games. For instance, something that Unity provides is this thing called a sprite. If you want to add a new sprite to the game, then you just go over here, 2D object, because I'm working in 2D, and you add dynamic sprite, and kapow, you have a dynamic sprite. And how dynamic is this sprite? It is this dynamic. If I quickly run my project here, it takes a little bit because Unity is a beast. You need a powerful computer to run this. It hit that corner and rolled off the edge because dynamic sprites have physics simulated, which is amazing. Simulated physics, I mean, I've never done that, and there's a reason for that. Simulating physics is a pain, but Unity does all that for you, so you can spend less time crying because you can't figure out how to simulate physics, and you can spend more time coming up with awesome game ideas and then implementing those awesome game ideas. So yeah, it takes away a lot of the technical knowledge that you need to build a game, and frees you up to work on the creative aspect, which is always a really fun part of the video game creation process. The Unity engine has a lot of very solid games under its belt. Hollow Knight, Cuphead, both of the Ori games, and I think Celeste too. Ironically, like my top 5 favorite games were all made in Unity engine. So yeah, it's very powerful, very versatile. You can do so much cool stuff with this, and I wanted to get into a little bit of that, which is why I built this project. Now, after a long preamble, we can finally get into the demo. So because I lost all my progress, I just knocked together this quick little demo level so I can show you guys what's going on. So as you can see, here we are in Unity Engine. If you hear a faint noise, that is my computer fan trying to prevent my motherboard from soldering into a solid lump of dirty sand. And so yeah, here we are. As you can see, or as maybe you can see, it's very possible that you are blinded by the fact that there are now 2 Brians on your screen right now. That's right, 2 Brians with 2 Ys, 1 Y apiece. It's just phenomenal that there can be this many Ys on the screen at once. So yeah, the one that's moving around more and is behaving in a more interesting way. Yeah, these are images. Shout out to Lauren, by the way. Lauren, the sister. Lauren took a bunch of pictures of me and doing these various things, and then I imported these into Unity. So as you've noticed, there's this car down here. I chose a car as the enemy because I'm here in Rexburg, and as a pedestrian, cars are really the only enemies I have in Rexburg. Shout out to David, a pal of mine, for coming up with the idea. It's an excellent idea because I didn't know what else I was going to use for enemies. I was thinking like skeletons or something, but I mean, I'm walking to class. I never see skeletons or anything walking around. That'd be silly. Kind of cool, though. It would certainly make walking to class more exciting, but no, it does not happen. I have some moves. I can walk around, very important. I can jump, which is also very important in a platformer. Another really neat thing to add in a platformer is a short hop, and so I figured that out. Very simple. There's also this dash move I added. The cartoony dust effects have been added in post. I did not actually kick up a bunch of flower dust and then take a picture of it because that would be a pain. So yeah, I made mention there's an enemy here, so what do you do with enemies? Well, you fight them, for one thing, and so I added some fighting moves. I have a cane, and so I made some attack moves with this cane, and it iterates through these attacks, and the attacks do in fact work. I'm about to jump into combat, so if you see a cut here, that's because I failed to defeat the car. The car is actually a very difficult enemy, which I made because I want some challenge in my video games. So yeah, the heat is on. Looks like the car has a little bit more friction than it did last time. So there is 2 hits on me. I have 1 HP now. It's the 1 HP run. It takes 10 hits to beat a car. So yeah, I hit it once, and it went flying, which is exactly what happens in real life, by the way. Okay, I hit 0 HP, but I have not yet implemented the HP feature because I'm not good enough to beat my own game with this setup as it currently is. So in fact, because I don't die when I go to 0 HP, I am now immortal, not just in the game, but in real life. I cannot be killed. It's amazing. I got hit by a car yesterday, and I just shrugged it off like nothing. Very interesting. Of course, I still flew through the air and turned red, but it was pretty cool nonetheless. I think somebody took a video of it and put it on TikTok, so watch out for that. Yeah, I'm dodging around here. As maybe you can tell, or maybe you can't, because I'm too busy getting hit by a car, you can only dash once in midair. You can't jump in midair. Turns out all these kind of these checks that take kind of a long time to figure out if you're building your engine from the game up or just using a simpler engine like Pygame, it's really easy to work with. So like the thing about Unity is it takes forever to learn how to use the tools, but once you do learn the tools, you can do pretty much anything, and really fast too. It's very cool like that. So this car should be almost dead. I don't know, I haven't kept track of how many times I've hit it. Yeah, of course, the HP in the bottom left keeps track of how many times it has hit me. Okay, I hit it, it exploded, or it really just disappeared. It is no longer in the game. I can now dash freely without being interrupted by any hitboxes of the car. So yeah, that's the demo level that I put together. Now let's get into the code block. Okay, so here we are in the code. I'm using VS Code as my editor because it is simple and all-purpose and effective and has lots of useful plugins. So Unity, it has these things called scripts. As when you create an object, you can add components to that object, and here I better move to my custom to place. When you create an object, you can add components to that object, and one of the components you can add is called a script. And if you add a script object, you can use certain kind of markup features to tell Unity Engine stuff about what you're trying to do. And up here we have using Unity Engine. This means use the Unity Engine library. And Unity understands what I'm talking about, but VS Code doesn't, which made programming this really irritating. But I figured it out in the end with the help of some extremely useful YouTube tutorials from this YouTuber named Brackies, linking his channel in the description below. If you want to learn anything about Unity, his channel is an excellent place to start. Very in-depth tutorials and very, very helpful, applicable, useful information and downloadable scripts. So essentially how this works is the enemy controller. Let's start with the enemy controller because it's only one script. So the enemy controller, it has all these references, these serialized, I'm pointing at the screen, these serialized field. These tell Unity Engine to that when you're in the editor, make like a little box that you can drag and drop game objects into so the script can work with those objects. And I get some references to bits of the enemy that we need to think about when doing calculations, and then I have all these variables to control how fast it moves and how fast it can move, how fast it accelerates, all kinds of stuff like that. How much HP it has is right there. We have a variable to hold the current HP, because if they were always at max HP, they'd never hit 0, and then they would be immortal like me. So this update function, like Unity, it goes through your script, and whenever it sees update with a capital U, it's like, I'm going to execute that once every frame. And fixed update is the same, except it executes it once every graphics frame. And I don't know if those are two different things in my project. They might be, I have no idea. And then aside from these predefined Unity functions, you can also add your own functions like any programming language. So I have this take damage function here. It's public because later in the player script, when I'm swinging my cane around and trying to hit a car, I need to, once I hit a car, I need to think about a way to tell the car, hey, you should get hit. Because if the car doesn't know that it's being hit, then obviously it will never take any damage. And we can't have that. So, and then there's the track player. Essentially, it just drives towards the player, wherever it happens to be. Update facing computes which way it should be facing based on how fast it's going and in what direction. And then die, it just destroys itself, so it's no longer a part of the code or the project. Although it's still a part of the project, but not a part of the game. So I don't have to worry about it anymore, which is good. If this was a boss, I would probably throw some code in here like progress to the next level or something, but as it's just a regular old enemy, then this code does the job just fine. On collision enter 2D is another built-in function from Unity. It knows the various hitboxes of the card. Whenever any of them touches the player's hitbox, it will cause the player to take damage. The player over here also has a take damage function that is public, so I damage cars the same way that they damage me. Fair is fair, as they say. Character controller 2D. Most of this code was taken from one of the YouTube tutorials I was talking about earlier, but I did add much code of my own, like the dashing code and the damaged code. I had to figure this out, a lot of it, by myself, but the character controller and player movement are different because character controller it's like really low-level stuff. It's like you tell it to move, and then it goes into the engine and moves the character around, stuff like that. And it applies the force to your rigid body when you want to jump. So it makes sense that the character controller and the player movement are two different scripts because they're doing two different things. The player movement takes in input, and then the character controller kind of executes the input, you could say. The player movement figures out what the character should be doing, and then the character controller makes it actually do that. So yeah, there are two different scripts because it's doing two different things. The crowning jewel of the character controller is the move function, which has all these flags which are called by the movement script, and it just, depending on what the player movement script tells it to do, it will do different things. It'll figure out what it needs to do, like, should we be dashing? If so, let's dash. And are we allowed to jump? And it's like, are we allowed to dash? Have we dashed since we hit the ground last? And it will figure that out. So we can't just dash infinitely, as cool as that would be. It would certainly help me get to classes on time. Also make sure that you're facing the right way, which orients both our image and our hitbox for smacking stuff. And this is the short hop code. And then player movement, I have some combat stuff. Update is called all the time. In player movement, update checks for your input and sets the various Boolean variables to true or quite possibly to false, depending on what you input. Fixed update, we talk to our character controller and pass in all of the Booleans that we collected in the input phase. And then we go over to the animation handler. We'll talk about that in a second. And then these various functions that you need to attack stuff with. Then over here in the animation, this was kind of a nightmare to figure out because I have this big list of sprites. What this mainly does is the update image. Similar to the move function from the character controller 2D, it takes in a whole bunch of booleans and an integer even, which is our dash timer, which determines should we be in the dust cloud phase or the zooming phase of the dash. And it takes all this information and figures out what our image should be and sets our image to that image. All these serialized fields up here are how I tell Unity which images to use for what things. I could mix up these images. I could take images of somebody else and use those instead if I wanted to make more characters if I ever felt inclined to do such a thing. And then update combat image. This really just does the exact same thing as update image, but this update image function is enormous and I didn't feel like dealing with it, so I just made a new function. There you have it. That is essentially how the code works. Thanks very much for watching, and